How's it going, everybody? This is Brian for Pop Culture Crossing, and today we are talking about 1953's The War of the Worlds. This movie is based on H.G. Wells' novel of the same name, which was originally published in 1898. 40 years after its publication in 1938, the story was adapted as a radio show with the help of Orson Welles. The show was so realistic and effectual in its depiction that it actually created real-life hysteria amongst its listeners, as they thought Earth was really being invaded by Martians. In 1953, the story was adapted for the silver screen under the direction of Byron Haskins. The movie focuses heavily on a small Southern California town during the Martian invasion. It's surprisingly well executed and will likely leave an impression on viewers. The War of the Worlds' story centers on a Martian invasion of Earth and their subsequent attack of our planet. Those living in a small Southern California town initially believe that the Martian spacecraft are some kind of meteor or space particle, but it becomes clear that they are in fact extraterrestrial vehicles. Science and military philosophy collide as Earth's inhabitants scramble to devise an actionable strategy for defeating the invaders. Time is of the essence as more pods are landing throughout the world and the aliens are raising cities. The film's pace is pretty typical for this type of movie. You have an initial event happen, mystery builds, and then everything comes to a head in the third act. This movie does have a nice opening sequence complete with narration that as a viewer was really appreciated as it sets the stage. The first act is a bit slow, however, as the mystery does build, but once the Martians become violent and the military responds, the pace accelerates. The third act is actually the best in my opinion. Not surprisingly, the situation becomes desperate, and just when you think it cannot get any worse, it does, and it does so in an effective, stressful manner. It would have been nice if the pace could have quickened sooner, especially since the film is on a pretty short runtime, coming in at just under an hour and a half, but considering the story and its context, the pacing framework itself is pretty natural, and the final package is still tight. The movie does an effective job at utilizing radio broadcasts and military updates to show the invasion's global impact while still maintaining its micro-level focus of the inhabitants of a small Southern California town. The film's use of these short interstitials really effectively bridge the story and create this overall cohesion that really makes the narrative feel like it is, in fact, global. It was a bit heavy-handed when the movie does blatantly say that Washington, D.C. is the only city to be unscathed in this entire ordeal. And it's like, okay, yeah, we know American exceptionalism was growing in the 50s, and you have the beginnings of the Cold War and stuff, but that was a little over the top, and it's kind of eye-rolling. So that's a note that I want to make there. There are several aspects regarding War of the Worlds' tone. Broadly, the movie does a good job showing the hysteria and dire situation caused by the invasion, particularly as things develop in the second and third acts. More specifically, the theme of communication versus confrontation is presented, and this element is complete with ethical and theological points of debate. At a brief moment, the characters discuss whether or not the Martians are in fact living beings because they aren't human, and a reverend even contends that the Martians may be closer to the Creator because they aren't human, while depending on whatever theological side you're on, I think that could be taken down in an official theological debate. But nevertheless, I was not expecting the movie to have these serious undertones, and I was initially thinking that the movie was going to be pretty campy and light, typically what you would think of like a 1950s, 1960s alien film, but I was pleasantly surprised that it is actually more serious than that. The War of the Worlds also features a juxtaposition between science and military might. Although scientists work with the military, it becomes clear that Earth's inhabitants may have to rely on science to discover a way to save civilization. As the film was released in the early 1950s, it's really terrific to see a female scientist in the movie. Another more minor tonal premise is the mere problem of communication itself. Some people think that terrestrial communication conventions are universal when in fact they are not. And it's clear that this mindset is flawed, and making such assumptions could have deadly results. Gene Barry and Anne Robinson are the principals in the movie. Barry's Dr. Clayton Forrester has a calm demeanor, but it's really nice to see that take a dramatic shift in the third act. And it's interesting to watch Forrester as he has an advisory role with the military, and then when he works with the team of scientists at the Pacific Institute of Science and Technology. Robinson's Sylvia Van Buren is also well acted. Robinson and Barry have good on-screen chemistry, and the two share sequences filled with tension and terror. Robinson's depiction of Van Buren's panic is memorable, as are the entire last 10 minutes of the movie. The cinematography and editing are additional strengths of the movie. Some of the sequences and shots are surprisingly impactful. Library shots are used to good effect during the scenes showing the other locations, the interstitials I mentioned a few moments ago. And the editing in those sequences is also smooth in terms of creating this continuity and this overall feel of this global impact. The War of the Worlds has good production design. The heat ray and vaporization effects are good and ominous. In some scenes, however, the rays appear, and in most scenes, actually, the rays appear as sparks, while in others, they really look like hand-drawn beams. By comparison, I thought the sparks were better looking and more effective, but the effects of the Martians' weapons themselves is still haunting nevertheless. And this is evidenced in part by the movie winning the Academy Award for Best Effects for special effects. I did, however, feel like the use of ash in these effects was more efficacious than the scenes showing people or objects being beamed out of the shot. So they would turn a color and then you'd see them kind of fade out and then they're gone. Kind of like they're being erased from the camera shot. We've seen this in other movies in the 50s and 60s and 70s and such. But for this movie especially, I definitely thought, since they had two methods of doing this, just showing the result of it was much more powerful than seeing things kind of be erased from the camera. The design of the Martians themselves is good and relates to the cinematography, with there being a powerful camera shot near the film's conclusion, again in the third act. The depiction of the Martians as spacecraft was also likely more intimidating during the time frame of the film's initial release in the 1950s. Today, it definitely reflects the movie's space age aesthetic, and luckily the advanced weapon systems on the vehicles help offset the Happy Meal toy appearance that they have. Perhaps the seemingly innocent appearing craft were supposed to be contrasted with their genocidal capability, but if that was supposed to be the intent, then it definitely should have been communicated more effectively throughout the film. Nevertheless, this is more of a small note and critique. It's not this movie-breaking critique by any means. And that design style itself was more popular in the 1950s and 60s, and the film's original context definitely needs to be considered. Byron Haskins' direction of The War of the Worlds is quite good. The sense of hopelessness that he conveys, coupled with the strong performances of the cast and the memorable scenes, show the well-rounded nature of his direction. As mentioned a few moments ago, it would have been nice to have the pace quicken sooner, but the third act really is what makes the film worthwhile. And the way in which Haskins weaves the various serious tonal elements together is really something for which he should be commended. The aforementioned Academy Award win for Best Effects was joined by nominations for Best Sound for Recording and Best Film Editing. So these also buttress Haskin's direction. In conclusion, The War of the Worlds is a great film that really exceeded my expectations. The nuanced manner in which the film breaks traditional stereotypes of sci-fi, especially alien invasion movies, is really laudable. The more serious tonal motifs succeed in making the film a remarkable movie. And if you enjoy 1950s styled sci-fi or quote-unquote retro sci-fi, or if you're just looking for a good classic alien film that's filled with important subtexts and topics for debate, then you should look no further than 1953's The War of the Worlds. So that's my review of the movie. Be sure to let me know your thoughts in the comments below and on our social media. As always, you can catch our full detailed written review at popculturecrossing.com, and be sure to like and follow and subscribe to us all throughout our social media, from Twitter to Facebook to Instagram to iTunes and Google Play Music and VidMe. In the meantime, why don't you let me know what your favorite classic sci-fi movie is? I look forward to reading your responses and your reasons why you have those movies picked. And I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye.